when you think about the way an athlete eats, even when you think about the way you yourself may eat on any given day, it can operate on a spectrum of where you may have more healthy eating days, and you might dip down where you might have to miss a meal. Students, when they're at school during exams, again, eating habits will often become quite atrocious. But then you go down to the other end where you're actually into a full-blown psychiatric eating disorder. And it's not to say that one will lead to the other, but there's a whole lot of these disorders which reside right in here that become very, very difficult to measure and monitor. And we know that these high-risk sports will be more susceptible to these kinds of disordered eating behaviors, those sports that are in the aesthetic area, gymnastics, figure skating, where the body is very much on display, endurance sports, where the athlete carries themselves from A to B, thinking that if there's less of me, I'm going to get there faster, and then weight classification sports. Now, even though these are the high-risk sports, we find this present in every single sport that we have measured. So the illusion that it might not be happening in ice hockey or in basketball or in field hockey, that again would be fooling yourself. The other tricky part is that these asymptomatic features that we don't always tell, can't always tell when a female cycle is occurring regularly or not, especially with a growing number of them taking oral contraceptive pills, which is another conversation in and of itself. But we know that as we move from those athletes that have the most regular menstrual cycles to those that have the least number of menstrual cycles, known as amenorrhea, this is what happens to their bone mineral health. And these are in healthy, otherwise healthy young women in their 20s. And this becomes very worrisome when we know that these young athletes, that as they are going through peak height velocity and puberty, these are meant to be the richest years in which they are laying down bone mineral density, between the ages starting around 8 or 9, all the way up until their early 20s. When we have these kinds of insults, we interfere with peak skeletal mass deposition. And this again sets them up that when they enter their adult lives, they are not dealing with as big a bone bank as they could have. And we know that it doesn't take much of an athlete. In fact, what this one is showing here, these are just normal, inactive, non-athlete women, and this blue circle just represents all of those that have hormonally perfect, so to speak, cycles. And then down here, we see that these are recreational athletes, so their VO2 max is low 40 mils per kg per minute. So again, not stellar, but these are just recreational athletes. And even those athletes, only 50% of them have a hormonally intact full menstrual cycle. There is so much that we don't know. We know that, and the other stat on this is that about 25% of high school students of high school age seem to be having a number of these issues where they do not have hormonally full cycles. So again, there's a messaging coming out around what are the consequences, and in particular around bone mineral density, and about raising awareness and getting the discussion going a little bit more frequently around what we can do. Now, this is the last injury that I want to bring to your attention. Now, this is where my true stretch, and I don't mind if you don't like it, not at all, but I kind of like it. That's why I was somewhat courageous to bring it forward here. And so I want to bring you back. Remember the definition of injury? So we understand that injury, lost participation, kids might get dropped from a team, they might not, increase risk of re-injury and so on. So what I'm asking you to do is, can we expand our understanding beyond those injuries of mechanical or energetic origin? Because we've got the documents behind that. So now I want you to imagine, okay, well, injuries, we're usually looking for the visible bobo, right? I mean, if we can see it, If we see an athlete limping along, we go, oh yeah, you know, you got a bad wheel. What happened? This particular person's got a bad wheel. Maybe they've got a concussion or an earache and then a little grazed elbow. But now, what about these other possibilities what about the girl that comes to practice and just doesn't feel welcomed, feels a bit rejected because, you know what, maybe her skill set is just really different or less than those around her. What about feeling left out of a game because, you know, they might not be part of that clique? What about the messaging, I think you suck? And whether it is delivered from one girl to another, which again, we've probably all heard, as well, the self-delivered message, I suck, oh man, I'm so awful. I mean, I would say that I haven't quite come up with the name for it, but I would like to argue that this too is an injury, that we are aware of how it happens, and if we are mindful of how it happens, then I do think we can create deliberate programming to avoid these. And I think Megan spoke to that very, very nicely about when women get together to realize there is this power of connection. And I believe this is like the blanket which overlays any type of female athlete program, is that when you are of your own volition, and it sounds like if many of you as dads become coaches of your daughters, that without making it seem terribly complex, that yes, it's different, but you're equipped to deal with it. And this is the way women tick. And if you can feed that part of their development, the not miraculous, because it's deliberate, but truly splendid things can happen. I often talk about being able to create warriors out of these women, that if you can get them to band around a common cause and to look after their heart, their brain, and their soul on that journey, it's a wonderful reward as a coach. So the last couple of slides is about creating an optimal performance environment. This positive social envelope. Challenge your athletes to become better. And phrases around deliberate practice and deliberate play. I'm not sure, these are again coming out of Jean Cote's talent development model, which I can speak to you afterwards if you like. Involve those female athletes in decision making when possible. Do not give up the house to them, but when they do have an opportunity to present and discuss decision making, whether it's around the team bonding or building events, team goals, how do they want to be assessed with their performance? Those types of decision making. Specific suggestions that I come up with: offer programs that create both a winning, competitive environment and allow for the development of social values important to female athletes. And I put up 4 bullets here because this, again, trying to compile a diverse literature set on this. And this kind of comes back full circle to the climate that we live in. We live with these entitled children that do not know how to fail, and in fact failure strikes them as something that is just so not an option for them. It's tough to get them to know how to meet with failure. So I talk about creating intentional opportunities to fail while they are in your hands. And again, sport is this marvelous environment to do that. When they fail, then they get to learn to do it differently, to try it again. You want athletes to be sensible risk takers. So reward that. You don't want robotic athletes. Hockey is one of the most creative, imaginative, brilliant games you can have. You can't have robots out there waiting to be told where to go and when to play. You want them to nurture that side of them, and so you build that into your practices. They want positive informational feedback. Again, Megan gives a lovely ratio of 5:1. Emphasize effort, persistence, and improvement. Your training grounds become a mastery climate. You create it. You give them that time to chat up front, and then it's time to do some work. Girls also respond very favorably to goal setting. So the SMART Abbreviations: specific, measurable, adaptable, realistic, and time sensitive. They love taking ownership of that, and it gives them instant feedback. So the desired outcomes of that: a training climate that welcomes the athlete, fosters recruitment and retention. As well, if you get a chance to deliver and support that message in other places like schools and other clubs that you might work with to promote physical literacy, do not become territorial of your 12-year-olds and under. Please remember the value and lifelong importance of physical literacy. The last point I want to mention is about the role modeling, which I think you're doing a wonderful job. This recent release called Misrepresentation: You Can't Be What You Can't See. These young girls need tangible role models in front of them. Not always the superstars, which can't be reached within a given day, but do you have local heroes for the little ones, for the 6, 8, 10-year-olds? Do you have kids in high school that are playing hockey? Do you have some fine athletes that you can bring in from local colleges? Make it in your own neighborhood. Make it tangible and real, so they're not always going after YouTube to find their latest celebrity or hero. And then the last, I'm not going to spend time on this, but the resources which are available to you in creating your programs, these are, this was coming out of CAUSE. It's the Canadian Advancement for the, or Association for the Advancement of Women in Sport out of Canada. It was a Canadian Sport for Life supplement. We just released this in January. Lots of good concrete recommendations. This is available on the web. As well, our BC, British Columbia Coaches Association, has a wonderful handout for you. So in summary, become aware of and intolerant of preventable injuries, whether they are mechanical, energetic, or that other one which I'm still struggling for a name. Examine your performance environment and role models. Be mindful of your choices. Thank you.